Media.
Why Media?
Why Media?
Why Media?
Why Media?
Why Media?
Stay tuned with Why Media.
Why Media is a media company. With 360-degree approach in reaching the audience over 8 media platforms. Television, Channel Y Canada, 24/7, available nationwide.
Hello and welcome to Editor's Take. I am Ramona Singh and it's great to spend this time with you. There's a lot happening here in Canada. I mean, this year has gone by quite fast. And even though we've talked about Canada being in a technical recession, being the only G7 country in a technical recession after we saw the numbers that were posted in Q4 of 2025 and Q1 of 2026, where we saw a contraction of the Canadian economy. Well, things have changed when it comes to the April numbers. That is the first month of Q2 of 2026. Canada has posted in the surplus when it comes to GDP. We're going to talk about what that means for Canadian jobs and the Canadian economy. And of course, we can't forget CUSMA, which is one of the biggest trade agreements that Canada highly relies on with its trading partners, the United States as well as Mexico. We're going to talk about the latest development on CUSMA. What does it mean for Canadians and jobs? And of course, we want to be able to catch up on all of the things that have been happening, the ups and downs of this conflict that's been going on for more than 3 months when it comes to US, Israel, and Iran, and what it means for the global markets, but what it also means for the region in the Middle East. And so joining me today is the group editor of Why Media, Yudhvir Jaswal, who's going to break down all of these issues so we understand better what's behind the headlines. Hello and welcome. How are you?
I'm doing great, Ramona ji. It's always good to be at Editor's Take, and so many things happening right here in Canada, US, across the globe. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. So we want to talk about good news, right? We saw the numbers, released by Stats Canada for the month of April. It looks like we're not in a recession because we posted 0.5% in GDP growth. And essentially, I think the bigger question is this a rebound or is it a temporary thing? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, first things first, we spoke about this at our last Editor's Take, and I clearly remember, at that time when I was mentioning the word, this is a technical recession. I got many calls on my radio show as well, and there was a lot of discussion whether this is actually a technical recession. And I think now those debates or discussion, I think we've put them to rest. I'll tell you why. Because I was explaining earlier as well, the recessions that we saw in late 80s or early 90s or at that time, those were bigger recessions, you would see, an year, 2 year, month after month, quarter after quarter, you would see the economy shrink. And one of the reasons, I made a prediction clearly, and at that time the April numbers didn't come out. I clearly said it's not going to shrink at all. And I'm making a prediction today for the whole quarter, the second quarter itself. I'll do that a bit later. But I think we were expecting that yes, economy will bounce back for multiple reasons. I think real estate, which is not talked about at all. I was looking at the numbers. There's lots of discussion about the manufacturing sector bouncing back, oil and mining sector bouncing back, so many other sectors, public sector as well. But there's very minimal discussion of the real estate sector. I follow that pretty closely as well. And when we're talking about GDP, the highest contributor to GDP around 12, 14, 15% is the real estate sector. I clearly see the real estate sector getting busier month after month. And we discussed that in last Editor's Take as well. Month after month, the sales are going up. So from that perspective, combined with oil and mining, the production, manufacturing, and public sector, I think we've seen these numbers 0.5. And to answer your question specifically, that is this a temporary thing or what are we seeing? Because you're right. I mean, we still had 2 quarters the GDP shrank. So that's precisely the reason we call it a recession, and we're saying it's the technical thing. So this is just 1 month, 0.5% growth. Economy is still, I won't say it's come to a grinding halt, but it's very sluggish, if I may use that word. And the economy would, I would say, grow. Say, for instance, the May numbers won't be 0.1, 0.2, somewhere around that. It won't grow that much. June, again, very similar numbers. I would say anywhere in between. I'm making a prediction again here, 0.1 to maybe 0.2. Maybe we could see a bit of a shrink as well. But overall, the second quarter, I would see 0.5%. I would see around 0.1 to 0.3% growth in this quarter on an annual basis. And overall, I would see, I know the Bank of Canada has already made a prediction of the annual GDP numbers for Canada that stands at 1.5. But you know what? I'll make a bold prediction here. I think Bank of Canada is saying 1.5, but I'll say it will be somewhere around 1.7 to 2. That's what I believe that's going to be for Canada. So I think we should put that discussion to rest. Of course, I clearly see this, that yes, we've suffered a lot in the last year on many aspects, but we've done reasonably well. If I may use or borrow this word, resilience. That's what we see in Canada's economy. That's what I've seen that a lot. And I clearly see, I'll again use that word resilience for this year, 2026 as well. Because I told you last year, I don't look at one numbers. I look at multiple numbers. And then from that, I combine all that. And that's how I come up with my numbers or my predictions. Yeah.
Okay, can you give us more reason to why you predict those numbers? What are some of the categories you're looking at and projecting? That would be helpful.
Sure. I think there are multiple factors to it. First things first, as I already mentioned, that's the real estate thing that I'm quite hopeful the sales are going to bounce back. Because, the numbers that we see right now in terms of, price for a condo or a semi-detached or a detached, they're all time low. There were many sitting on the fence. They're all now looking for good bargains, and that's precisely the reason you're seeing some uptick in the activity as far as the sales are concerned. We're still seeing, the prices are still down. So that's fine. I mean, a first-time home buyer, the investors won't really join, but I think any first-time home buyer, it's a great opportunity for them. And then combined with the, special incentives that the federal and the provincial government are providing. So I see a clear uptick on that side. That's number one. Second, we've seen a bit of an investment from the federal government in different areas. Prime Minister Carney, he just made another announcement. So there are billions of dollars being announced in terms of different projects. So he's just announced 3 projects there. They're talking about, fast track train. They're also talking about incentives. So all these investment put together, I think our economy, yes, of course, it's not going to do too much, but it'll still gain. Third point that I want to say is we've done a free trade agreement with Indonesia. We're trying to finalize the free trade agreement with India. Prime Minister Mark Carney, I think he traveled almost 24 countries in the last 12 months or so. So from Japan to Australia to China to India to Europe, I would see a clear growth in the exports. The other part, the only one thing I'm really concerned, and report after reports, Bank of Canada has mentioned that. And we all know that that is the uncertain part, that's a moving part, which is, very uncertain, bringing a lot of uncertainty. And that part is how the CUSMA would play out in the coming months or in the coming years. So with Trump, deal or no deal, there'll always be some sort of uncertainty. Another aspect, as much as I'm more of a real estate guy, but I do follow stocks and everything else as well. To my surprise, 2025, usually, in the last many years, this was my thing too. I would always say, go south. This was my thing. I may or may not invest, but this is what we're discussing. But last year, anybody who went south, our stock market here in Toronto, I'm talking in terms of growth. The US is a much bigger market, and the capital they are attracting, I don't think so any other country. I mean, there has been a capital flight from India, from China as well. So India and China not really, because we know one word, that's AI. Because of AI, they're attracting a lot of capital there. But there has been growth there, but our growth has been significant in 2025. The Canadian stock market, we've done reasonably well. So I would assume we could be doing reasonably well this year as well. And one of the things which my sources tell me, by the way, I'll also share this thing. That was only why media at the G7 summit, we clearly said this that our, and David Cochran, I'm even naming him from CBC, came to our colleague Shubi. That was a brilliant question that you asked, because we said our sources tell us, and when you're so confident from the Prime Minister that our sources tell us that the free trade agreement between India and Canada is almost done, all he had to say is twice, Prime Minister Mark Carney, that's fantastic. And then he third, maybe the audience didn't hear, oh, that's fantastic news. So what I'm mentioning over here is that yes, there is definitely a massive challenge, especially in Quebec and Ontario, regarding CUSMA and the challenges that we are facing regarding tariffs. But there are reasons to be optimistic. I mean, it's not all that gloomy that recession after recession or quarter after quarter we are seeing the GDP would shrink. So I'm predicting 1.7 to around 2 for all those reasons. Yeah.
1.7 or 2 for what? The
Annual GDP rate.
annual GDP.
At GDP growth, yeah,
Okay.
1.7% to, and we'll talk about this, I guess, in March or April next year, because that's the time we'll get these numbers. We won't get that in January, but in March or April we can talk about this. I mean, and I'm giving you the Bank of Canada number as well. It's 1.5. So I'm being bullish on this one, and I've explained to you the reasons. I can go on why I'm a bit bullish than Bank of Canada.
Please do. Yeah, please do. If
Okay.
there's more, yeah, please do.
Okay, if there's more, fine. I was recently I read a complete report of EDC, Export Development Council. So EDC, the report, they had surveyed around 1,300 exporters in that. So out of the 1,300 exporters, there was a time when a vast majority of them, their only export was to US. And now they're saying the number has dropped down from 62% to 34%. There was a time when 62% of exporters in Canada, the survey from 1,300 exporters by EDC, I'm also referring my source here. So anybody can go online and read that complete report. So maybe in the interest of time, I won't share too much, but maybe I'll take 2-3 minutes to share the numbers. So out of the 1,300 exporters, the numbers has dropped down from 62 to 34%. The exporters who have now saying, no, we don't just export to US. So the discussion that we were doing to diversify our trade portfolio, to mitigate the risk because of CUSMA, and I was listening this for last 25 years, but now I'm seeing it has really taken the pace in 2010, 2015, 2020, more so from 2025. So that's one factor. The other thing is now, I know we've discussed this earlier as well, and I was also intrigued to read the report that where are we looking at the growth from? Okay, fine, we're shifting. I'm listening to our Prime Minister Mark Carney discussing we want to double the non-US exports, but where do you want to go? And you had a good question. Your question was bang on when you said that, India, I mean, how much could you make up? Here's a $1 trillion bilateral trade. So the exports are definitely aimed towards Europe and Asia. In double digits, you'll see Germany, France, and UK. These three countries where exporters are targeting the most. I mean, when you read the survey of the 1,300 exporters, so this is the area of growth that they're focusing right now. Then there are single-digit countries as well, from Australia, Japan. Australia is around 8%. 7% of the exporters said we want to export to China. 7% said we want to export to Japan. So Australia, Japan, and China. So all these 6 countries, these are the prime targets of all the exporters. After that, you have other countries like India, Indonesia, Malaysia, all those countries. So I see a huge potential on that side as well. And all those who were not earlier planning to diversify, the number has grown significantly for those exporters who plan to diversify their trade. Then coupled with, because since you asked me what are I don't want to go into too much detail, but but I want to bring in other factors as well. Coupled with there's a discussion and there are talks and investment on our energy sector. we have increased our crude oil export by 44%. Now, this is not from EDC, by the way. Now I'm talking other things as well. So 44% increase in crude oil export. Why? We all know, for simple reasons, because there was a lot of challenges regarding the Strait of Hormuz, and after that, Canada did step up. And also, next year in 2027, we will be starting a lot of uranium export to India, almost $3 billion plus deal with them. Then our natural gas export. We are investing in our infrastructure, not only from the government sector, but private sector as well. And we will be increasing our natural gas exports to different countries. There's a lot of need in Asia, whether it's LPG or LNG. India needs that, Malaysia, China. These are all, energy deficient countries when we look at, especially China, India, Japan. And when you're talking about China, India, Japan, these are the top 5 economies there. Another investment that we'll see more often because of the political reasons as well, Alberta, separatism and all that, but more often we'll be seeing investment going into the oil pipeline. So now what happens from Alberta, the oil pipeline goes towards the east, and from there, instead of just sending all our oil, I would say around 90 or 94% of their oil was going to US, and they're getting at a discounted price. So here we are, when we get our act together, we set all those pipelines there. So starts traveling from Alberta towards the east, and then from east towards Asian markets in east. So then we are going to get better prices, stable customers as well. India is already offering that. I was there with Minister Piyush Goyal, India's Commerce Minister. I attended many events, and one of the things that he highlighted there, because there was the discussion, obviously had many meetings, but I think I was present at least 4 of them. And one of the key discussions they were having is that India is ready to partner with you. I can go on. I mean, there are 2 speeches which I'll talk about later on. The Economic Club of New York, I've listened that speech. If you listen to that, and Mark Carney, he just recently, on his own YouTube channel, there was a 17-minute video. You can always say, okay, this is him talking or glorifying his achievements, 1 year, this, that. That's fine. But then when you cut the clutter and you really bring out what is the substance, there is some discussion. I mean, okay, if we leave aside his direct videos on YouTube, the speech that he gave at Economic Club of New York, I was planning to attend that, but I had a major conflict of another. I had to be, otherwise I would have been there in New York. But I wanted to see, because here he is talking to those who really matter, because these are the people who are investing. These are the people, I mean, he's talking to the billionaires there, the who's who that matter at the top, corporate executives. They would matter at the end of the day. Now he's going, and it's not just the optics that I come in your backyard, Mr. Trump, I'm giving a speech at the Economic Club of New York. But he's also clearly saying this, that yes, we are ready for investment, and these are the areas which will give you better return. The stock market is doing good. Canada is stable. Canada is stronger. And he also mentioned that, Trump uses this a lot. Let's make America great again. So he said, a stronger Canada will make America great again. Please.
Yeah, those are excellent points in terms of all the announcements and all the investments that our federal government is doing. But those are going to have long-term results in terms of a return on those investments. The pipeline going to the west, I think you meant from Alberta to British Columbia, and then off to the Pacific Asian markets. That's all in the talks. We already have the Trans Mountain there, but it's about increasing its capacity, and some other pipelines that are being announced. But when it comes to the pipeline to the east, which is where we are, that's a long term. We're looking at, decade of, in terms of development. Regardless, the oil that goes from Alberta to the United States, there's a pipeline there, 90% go there. It is below market rate. They refine, Albertan crude oil, and then they export. So that's going to be the case, because we're not going to shut off those pipelines. But so when it comes to some of these things, I mean, it's a very challenging situation. I think President Trump coming back into office for a second term, even though it's been very difficult and very challenging, it has presented an opportunity for Canada to be able to reassess it's our existence in terms of what does our economy look like, what are the jobs that we create, what are the sectors we rely on, and then take a look at where is Canada positioned in the world. This CUSMA is a $1.3 trillion trilateral agreement, and 75% of our exports go to the United States. So it kind of kept us in a cushiony situation when you had a very great trading partner and a great ally that you would that we have in the Americans prior to President Trump, who's made things a lot more difficult and unstable. And now Canada's looking at where do we stand on the global stage, not just where do we stand in North America, for example, with our trading partners, Mexico and the United States. And so all of these plans are definitely something. I mean, it changed our politicians, for example. We went into multiple elections last year when President Trump came back into office for a second term. And so, yeah, so even though it looks very positive in terms of what the April numbers look like for the GDP, the 0.5% increase, and then even early estimates of May is at 0.1% increase in GDP. So it's looking positive, but what I wonder is what does it mean with the CUSMA situation, given that it doesn't have the 16-year term renewal, right? It came into effect after NAFTA back in 2020 on July 1st. It did have a clause of a 6-year review. And so July 1st, 2026 is that 6-year review mark. And if the three countries in this CUSMA agreement, which is Canada, United States, and Mexico, don't agree to renew for another 16 years, then we go into a situation of a renegotiation and an annual review, which is something that businesses have already said that they're seeing massive issues when it comes to investment dollars coming into Canada, foreign investment, also within the existing investment from the business side in terms of are we going to expand our operations? If it's, let's just say, if it's in manufacturing, what does it mean in terms of the overhead? What does it mean in terms of hiring people? All of that gets held on the backlog. And if an industry doesn't know if it's going to have a tariff against it from any given time, then it's very hard to predict in terms of what to do in terms of business planning. Any investment dollars that go in from the private sector, essentially they want a return on that investment, and you won't even know what the return on that investment is because you're not aware of your overhead. Given that CUSMA gave Canada the shelter of having 90% of the exports under free trade, meaning zero tariffs, and that is something that is very unpredictable now. So how do you think that's going to impact now that we're going into Q3 and Q4, given that Canada is going to be in a situation where it has to do this annual negotiation and then also annual review, but also the negotiations on President Trump wanting more access to our dairy industry, wanting more access in terms of having more American-made vehicles. There's so many different concessions that President Trump wants Canada to make. And then you have on the other side of the business community suffering, but then you have the unions, which are in the auto sector and they don't want to have a deal where it would mean less for Canadian workers. So I wonder what that would mean for Canada's growth and GDP, given this CUSMA situation.
You're absolutely right. All the points that you just made, they are very valid and very concerning as well. Not just valid, but very concerning. Why? Because a lot of jobs, our economy, and a lot of other things rely on all those points that you just made. And that's precisely the reason that I didn't make a prediction. I could have been even more bullish. Instead of 1.7 to 2%, I would have made, in case all this CUSMA thing was settled and there was no war there, not much of war, but mainly this thing, I would have made prediction of easily I'm making 1.7 to 2. I would have said then 3% plus. Yeah, our economy would have grown this year itself 3%. That's the prediction I would have had in case we didn't have all these challenges. Those are Those are all valid points that you just made. So, of course, energy would play a very important role. And you're right, pipelines not just towards the east, but towards west, east-west pipelines. There's been a lot of talk about oil refineries, but here is US. Nobody has invested in the last 50 years in an oil refinery. So why would somebody invest here? As much as our prime minister is saying we want more investment, we want to attract capital, and the speech that he gave at the Economic Club of New York, I'm talking about that. But then, giving a speech is one thing, and I think his points are valid. But then the investors have a million things to think about before they invest anywhere, and especially given the current scenario, because they know, I mean, any major investment that will flow from US, uh, Trump is not going to blink. He's going to definitely look at that. Why would you invest in US? And then you're right on this point as well, that yes, the tariff things, especially in Quebec, and I mean, depends upon which industry you are in. The interesting part is, the merchandise export to US has actually grown from Canada. Precisely the reason was that China, certain things which are a little bit more expensive because of the tariffs from China. So, okay, fine, let's talk to our next door neighbor. So it's definitely the auto sector, as you were just mentioning, the unions, the auto sector has suffered a lot. The steel sector has definitely suffered, aluminum, then softwood lumber. You spoke about dairy. Yes, they want more access, and that was a discuss. This dairy and the farming sector. This is a discussion in every free trade agreement. This is always a part of a major discussion, whether it's US and India, because India, has one of the most protectionist policies. So they also wanted to, as much as Canada or US offers, without subsidies, without the protection, the farmers won't survive. Whether we're talking US, and they are basically, providing us food on our table. So we have to support our farmers. We have to support our dairy producers. That's for sure. And every country does that, from New Zealand to Australia to Switzerland to European Union, the deal that we're doing with India, to US-India trade agreement. And you're mentioning unions here. That's a concern about the farming unions there in India too. So it's a concern everywhere. So that's one of the sticky points. And you're also mentioning regarding, among other aspects, I want to highlight, US also wants to, have a say how we're dealing with China. They may not say very explicitly, but that's what they want. They're concerned. Not only just what sort of EV vehicles are we importing, that they've said quite openly, but they also want to know, like, okay, the Chinese, these TikTok and all these things. So how's Canada dealing with them? If US says, okay, we ban TikTok, thank you, you should do that too. So that's what their expectation is. So there were around 36 points that US raised, and these 36 points that US raised, last I checked, I don't think so, even 20, and that's precisely the reason. Otherwise, if July 1st was the date, I mean, anybody would have been anticipating. So then they would have announced something, and how did I, say in certain times in journalism, I don't do that very often. We have to be very, very clear on our stats. But certain times 2 plus 2 does add up, and we say, okay, 2 plus 2 is 4. How do we do that? If at all there was, if Trump was leaning towards signing this agreement and letting it continue, this would have been announced at G7. Because then President Trump doesn't want to, announce this only between US and Canada. Here is G7. Then we would have seen a bilateral between President Trump and Prime Minister Mark Carney. When the reporters asked him, and I was watching the press conference live, and the reporters were asking him, did you talk to Trump? Did COSMA come up? So Prime Minister Mark Carney, that department is being taken care by Minister Dominic LeBlanc. Okay, he's dealing with. So yes, we all know Dominic LeBlanc is continuously in discussions with, his US counterpart, Jameson Greer. But then if Jameson Greer and Dominic LeBlanc are talking, and if things were really moving forward, if that was the progress, then we would have heard that at G7 itself. So we know those 36 points that US is talking about, they have not been fully resolved. And as much as Mexico is saying, I heard President Claudia Sheinbaum, she was mentioning that, we are on the same page with Canada. and we're working very closely with Canada. Tomorrow, who knows? Suddenly, President Trump would say, you know what? We're going to do a special deal with you, But Kuzma, no, we're not reviewing that. Where does that leave us? So, and anything could happen. And at this point, President Trump needs a win. And I'm sure we'll talk about at our stake the Iran-US issue, the political issue, the war that happened, and what's going on right now. But he needs more and more wins. The midterm polls are approaching. So he would definitely want to take a deal that, you know what, this is what we got out of it. But let me tell you another aspect. President Trump, was claiming we'll get trillions of dollars. They can claim we're getting trillions of dollars. The tariffs that he imposed on Canada and other countries. But I also want to remind our audience at the editor's stake, this is very important, as an editor or as a journalist. I just can't talk about yesterday's or today's newspapers. Yes, when I'm talking about everything, I need to look at the holistic picture. I have to go back to February when the US Supreme Court, when they gave a ruling that yes, the tariffs, I mean, it's not your jurisdiction. There's no such thing as emergency. So now that $200 billion, it wasn't there are no trillions of dollars coming in tariffs. No, there are no trillions of dollars. Okay, let's assume it's 200 billion, or maybe I don't want to put the number to 300 or 400 billion, but for discussion's sake, okay, even if it's 300 or 400 billion, I would assume it's $200 billion. Now that money has, I mean, who's benefited with that? Who's benefited? Tell me. Because that money is being paid by the importers. So if Canada is exporting anything, or China or India, that money is being paid. We all know that, right? There's no rocket science to this. We've discussed this multiple times. Why I'm bringing up this again? So what was the issue? At the heart of this, Trump was clearly claiming, oh, we have a huge deficit with Canada. So have you done anything to get rid of the deficit? Of course, there is a huge deficit. You have billions of dollars deficit with China, India, Canada. That's right. But after 1 year of tariffs, if the deficit has reduced maybe 2 billion, 5 billion, we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars here in trade deficit. So, and that has been for the longest time. So now if we're talking about this, because I'll look at the numbers every day. So if I would read the numbers, oh, we reduced the deficit by $150 billion. Now we're talking, oh, the deficit reduced by $150. Good job. Oh, the inflation rose by 1% only because of tariffs. Oh, inflation rose by 1%? Yeah. There are multiple reports in the last 6 months, maybe $700 or $800 the cost would increase on an annual basis per family. So our idea was to bring down the inflation, and here with our policies, the inflation has gone up. So with Canada as well, as much as I know these are very tough and challenging times for Canada, but I'm hoping at the start we thought US has a lot more leverage, but now I think maybe Canada also has some sort of leverage. I'm not saying that we are on strong footing right now. We have our own challenges, but yes, I would say Canada has shown resilience, and that's why I'm a bit optimistic on this.
What is Canada's leverage?
Canada's leverage is, first things first, that yes, even today, Prime Minister Mark Carney, I was listening to his speech, he says our relationship with the US is not that anymore. If at all it is anything, it's vulnerable. So sometimes he's using that's a thing of the past, the new order the speech that he's giving at Davos. I'm listening to him here in Canada. I'm listening to him in India. I'm listening to him when he went to Australia on a panel discussion. I'm listening to him in New York. So, and I listened to him here at Fairmont Royal York, when former President Barack Obama was there, his entire cabinet, one single theme. So, first things first, the central theme of all this discussion is, okay, enough. And you know what? When he gave a speech at the Liberal Convention, the loudest applaud that was when he stood up and he said, 3/4 of the Canadian dollar that was going to US in terms of defense spending. Here we are about to spend billions of dollars. I know many people, when I talk, okay, in Ottawa, or when I was in Ottawa for a few days and here in Toronto as well, Oh, what are you guys doing? Oh, we're in the defense. Oh, we're in defense. Everyone is moving to the defense industry, whether, working with the defense industry, or they're trying to set up some plant or do something or lobbyist. So why? Billions of dollars Canada would be investing in defense industry. But now Canada has the leverage. Now Canada is saying, thank you. Your F-35 fighter jets are the best. And Trump saying our jets are the best. They're performing this. But is Canada buying your F-35s? I don't think so. I doubt. I mean, maybe we are placing the order because you have to place that order well in advance. Maybe for the first batch, we could be placing orders. But then we are also talking to Sweden. We're also talking to other countries.
Yep.
So if India can say, despite negotiating the trade deal which is about to end, despite Trump saying, I'm coming to India early next year, in a few months I'm coming to India, despite Marco Rubio going there for a 4-day tour, despite Sergey Gore saying just 1% of the deal if less, 99%. But where is India buying its plane from? Rafale from France, or if not, maybe the second on the list is Sukhoi 57 from Russia. So if India and so many other countries, they're not buying F-35. So Canada also says we have our leverage. Okay, we'll see. Other part is Mark Carney making regular statements. We are the most European country outside of Europe. We can laugh it off or we can really take that seriously, whatever. But yes, here is Mark Carney trying to tell US and the world that yes, you know what, we middle parts. I know recently somebody said, who was it? The CEO of JP Morgan, when he said, yeah, I listened to him also in a panel discussion. He was making fun, which is fine. I mean, I respect that decision, and he could be true as well. When he's saying, it's a fantasy land. I think I'm just trying to recall what he said. So his point was, when Mark Carney talks about middle parts joining together, to your point, he doesn't have much of a leverage. What is he even talking about? The middle parts joining together. What could you do? Middle parts joining together. There's no such thing as middle parts joining together and doing something when everyone is investing in US, when everyone is looking towards the West. And if the CEO of JP Morgan is saying this, it means something. But I still believe, whether we're trying to seek $70 billion investment from Qatar, and investment from other countries is even better. Why? Because then you have the skin in the game. If you are investing $70 billion in our infrastructure, then you might as well want our economy to grow. Or if you're investing in a particular sector, whether it's tech, whether it's IT, artificial intelligence, or energy or pharma, then you would want that sector to grow. India, China, Qatar, many countries want to now invest in Canada. So that's the sort of leverage that we have. We're not going to rely solely on you. You're smiling, you have something. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, those are all excellent points that we've been seeing in terms of all the moving parts and developments in the last little while. Given that there's $3.2 billion worth of trade that crosses the border of the United States and Canada every 24 hours, and America is Canada's #1 customer, 75% of exports go there. It's just very hard to fathom in the short term, or even how long will it take to be able to have multiple countries be that big customer Canada has. Right now, Canada has that one big customer, which is the United States, 75% of exports. America buys from Canada. Biggest leverage Canada has is its energy sector, obviously, but we're not going to turn off the pipeline. So that's a no-go, even though that's our biggest leverage. It's something that we can't even use the leverage of. Maybe we increase the price above, at market rate. I don't know how well that's going to go because we rely on them. Again, they're our only customers. So the thing, I guess the lesson here is that if you have one really big customer who you rely on for your livelihood, to have a standard of living, to have a new level of stability and predictability, that one customer starts signaling to you that I don't really want to buy from you anymore. I just don't. What do? Right? And then you have to go find new customers. But then what timeline does it take to be able to replace that one big customer who says, I'm sorry, but I don't want to buy what you have to offer anymore? And also, how many more customers do you need to find to be able to replace that one big customer who no longer wants your goods. And if you work in the private sector, there's a rule of thumb, which is the customer's always right. So how do you balance this situation? Because we could talk about what irritated President Trump, what policies Canada put out there, whether it's protectionist policies, on so many different things. But then there's also, we've known President Trump for like about 10 years now politically, and we know that he's very unpredictable. One moment he's happy. He was happy with Kuzma. He's the one who signed it. He's the one who his administration in the first term was the one who negotiated it. And perhaps maybe Canada agreed to a 6-term review period because they thought, okay, you know what, 6-year review period, because they thought, okay, you know what, he's going to be not in, if he wins a second term right after his first term, he's not going to be in office. It's going to be fine. And the luck that we have is that he missed that one term, and now the 6-year review is in his second term. And when you look at that, you really question. You say, okay, it's great our prime minister is getting all these trade agreements. That's great. But what to do? What to do when your one customer says, sorry, but not sorry. And that one customer likes to surprise you. So even if they renew it, they're going to add some tariffs. They're going to do random things. And so I think my question is, regardless of all the news and movement from the cabinet and the prime minister, how do you deal with the reality, the writing on the wall, that your livelihood depends on the United States and the United States doesn't want to buy right now?
Yeah, you're right. And I think...
I mean, they'll buy, but they'll charge you.
Yes.
And so therefore, whatever you're selling at now gets inflated in the price. So I don't mean not buy. Yeah, they'll buy, but now your costs are going up and you have to reevaluate. So for example, sorry I interrupted, but for something that I sold maybe for $100, free trade, meaning no tariffs on it, now they're adding a tariff. And let's just say my cost now with the new taxes is a 150. Now my overhead is, now do I fire people because I just can't afford to have the staff? Do I reduce my production? How do I go source my material to bring down my costs to be able to have some sort of profit? Or do I go out of business? And then how many jobs are we looking at being laid off? I mean, as soon as you put the tariffs on the auto sector, we had plants closing down immediately, indefinitely, sending people home because they're like, we wouldn't be profitable even if you go and put a 25% tariff on our auto parts. We're not going to be profitable. We can't open our doors because we'll lose money if we open our doors. Right? So it's better not to even be in, to operate, to be in business. It costs you more to open your doors. So what happens in those situations? It's a reality.
Yeah, you're right on all those points. And just to further your point first, and then I'll talk about other things as well. How do we counter that? To further your point, first of all, I'd like to highlight, you're right. It's not that, you're right, it's not that they will still buy, but they can even stop buying as well. I'll tell you how.
Yeah.
Because there are many examples, but one of the prime example is the Stellantis plant, here in Brampton itself. I mean, when Stellantis saw that, okay, fine, we're getting more incentives here, or it's better to produce here, or okay, fine. So they say, okay, we're not going to really start, manufacturing more cars here. So Stellantis did that. Then, even if I don't name, everybody will understand, So there are other auto manufacturers as well. So when they started calculating that, yes, if we manufacture it here in Canada, the parts go back and forth. By the time they do all those calculations, they say, no, the final product, they'll go to the dealership. The dealer, because, say, for example, I'm just picking on a name here, a Ford. A Ford says, okay, I am producing this pickup truck, and you have a Ford assembly plant here in Oakville, right? So they say, okay, this finished product with all the tariffs, included, and we don't know what's going on, any further tariffs. So they say, okay, fine, if we produce here in US, and by the time we deliver to the dealership, it'll cost a little bit more. Say, for example, even if it starts costing 5,000 or 10,000 more to the dealership would say, how are we going to compete? People are not just only buying Ford, they do their own math. So if a car is manufactured here in US, and it could be of a different brand, and maybe it's Chrysler or some other brand, and then you have to compete.
Yeah.
So vice versa too. Vice versa, say for example, Chrysler has the same issue, Stellantis could have the same issue. So that way they could entirely stop producing here, stop purchasing here. And you're right, then I mean, what the auto unions, like the Stellantis plant, the auto union said, oh, this is happening. Why did the government kept on telling them, oh, we're working with them. The union said this is a dark day for Canada. Of course, it's a dark day for the auto sector. Of course, it's a dark day. But unions can say, but unions have no sway over what President Trump decides to do, right? As much as they're very powerful here, but that's a challenge there. So, as much as you're right, they can't just stop everything, but there are things that could really stop and that will have an effect. Steel. Now you start putting tariffs on the steel here. What was happening is China is dumping their cheap steel to Canada. So the Canadian steel manufacturers, what would we do? Oh, we start dumping our steel, or I'll use the word right one, actually export, but that's their terminology in US. When you read the US, not the newspaper, but if you read their statements from the US steel producers, oh, we say we are exporting it, but they say, oh, you're dumping it here because of China is dumping it there at a low price, you're dumping it here. So now to protect their steel manufacturers, because they're producing all those steel, and US, I was looking at their stadiums about a couple of years ago, and for many years, I'm really impressed by the infrastructure recently that US is producing. Amazing stadiums that you see, from LA to New York to Houston. I mean, oh my God. I mean, as much as I was enjoying all these Copa America games, a few years ago, and now I'm enjoying all these World Cup games back again. You see all those soccer action. Oh, stadium. I mean, Canada played the game in LA. Oh, beautiful stadium. And I'm planning to go maybe this year, next year. And as much as I'm a cricket fan, and there's a cricket stadium being built there, I want to go visit that as well. But I also want to visit these beautiful soccer stadiums there. So all that, when you are building all that infrastructure, you need steel. So the steel manufacturers would say, why not steal from US? So again, to your point, furthering your point, no, we do not want to buy your steel. It could be a total no. So whether it's auto, whether it's aluminum, whether it's this, softwood lumber, same thing, or the tariffs are quite huge. So Canada, there is a massive challenge. I agree to that. Now, to your point, let's put a number. How do we counter that? So one of the targets that Canada has set is $300 billion. So we want to make sure that our non-US exports increase by $300 billion. Where do we get all this export, $300 billion? I mean, with India in the next 5 years, we could increase by maybe 20 billion or 30 billion total in the next 5 years. The max could be okay, it could be maybe 50 billion, okay. China, another 30, 40, or maybe $50 billion. Okay, then Europe put all together. We want to increase our trade with Germany, France, England, all these countries being the major target. Maybe another $20 billion there. So then Middle East or other Asian countries, we've been there. We signed an agreement with Indonesia, and we're planning to sign with the Asian countries there, the 10 countries block over there. So let me sum it up. So out of that $300 billion in 2025, we were able to do $33 billion of an increase in the non-US exports. So if we really want to hit the target of $300 billion, it's achievable. But 2 points here. First, there's still a lot of hurdles to that, number one. Second, it is going to take time. It's not going to happen
it's gonna take
overnight.
time. Yeah.
So the challenge right now that we're facing is, uh, the window is really short, and we have a challenge at hand.
We
Yeah,
have a huge challenge at hand.
yeah,
And then when you take into consideration this AI situation where the companies that are doing well in the stock market are mainly, AI driven. I mean, Allbirds went from a shoe company to now AI bird,
yeah,
an AI company. You're having this massive race from like Meta that had its own advantage in the social media platform with Instagram and Facebook trying to, fast track its AI. Google, which was really a monopoly in search engine, now trying to become fast track its AI. investments, and in Amazon, same thing, where it was a giant monopoly when it came to consumer goods. Um, it's racing in AI. You had SpaceX that was not an AI company, but most of now, the biggest IPO is all projected on AI. So now we have all of these major companies that were essentially a monopoly in their own fields now racing against each other to become an AI company. So you have that. So you have the massive AI bubble that is probably going to burst any moment because of the massive investment dollars. They have these massive companies who are also now taking loans. Not only are they laying off thousands of people, we're now in the digits of tens of thousands of people they're laying off because they want to diversify their investments into AI in this AI race, and the capital it costs to even invest in AI and get the right talent pool. You have that taking place. But then the valuations of even some startups, because their AI it's a AI bubble, like happened with the railroad. It happened with when the internet, there was the internet bubble. So we know it's a matter of time, and we know that that's going to have a massive impact on society as a whole. So you have all of these challenges at the same time, and then you have Canada in a situation where, the fourth largest reserve of oil is in Alberta. Alberta, you have a premier in Alberta who's now scheduled a referendum. Yes, that referendum is not in a binding situation that, if it gets voted yes, that they go start the process, like they start, the process of separating from Canada. All it is if it's a yes, then they'll start looking into the legality of how to pursue it for a future referendum. But it's still going to have weight depending on how that goes. Now, there's reports that majority of what's happening online is not even, it's like foreign, right? That's what we saw in Brexit as well, which created a momentum for what took place in the UK. You have the elections, the provincial elections in Quebec in October. And again, on the ballot is that there'll be a referendum if, a certain political party wins, to be able to have a referendum on Canada. So here's Canada having these challenges. And we know when it comes to investment dollars, and more specifically in a place like Alberta, is that they need to know that the government is stable. They need to know the people are stable. They need to know all of those different things. So it's a very challenging time for Canada, even though I have to agree with you on the optimism I have for Canada in the long term, because it looks like we're now taking a look at what's happening, what's our positioning in the world, what are we doing domestically. But then there's also the question of, we have all of these trade agreements, yet we've limited our immigration numbers, and we know we need more Canadians to be, right? We need a higher population to be able to even service the level of agreements we're signing to be able to prosper. So that's another challenge. I think Canadians, our birth rate isn't comparable to other countries like India and the rest. So we really rely on immigration. That's another aspect that we have to look at it. We went through a period of mass immigration that created a situation where it was a strain on our infrastructure, right? Our housing, our our healthcare and everything else in between. And then we went through a process where we're like reducing those numbers, but then we're seeing how it's impacting the GDP and then the Canadian economy and our growth. So there's a balancing act I see that has to take place, but these are all, of course, long term. But the point coming back to is that right now what we're facing is there will be, it feels very challenging times ahead because, this CUSMA is Canada's lifeline.
Yeah, you know what? As much as we're all celebrating Canada Day, and if I may ask you this question, and you highlighted quite a few points already, but I won't. I think this definitely deserves a discussion because we're at crossroads right now. As much as we are celebrating Canada Day, but I think we're facing challenges from US, the global challenges as well for our economy. And if our Prime Minister, the two subsequent prime ministers have clearly mentioned. I mean, our former Prime Minister Trudeau clearly said this. We may agree or disagree with him, that the relationship that we had with the US is over. It's gone. Then speech after speech, Mark Carney is repeating the same thing. So he's not saying any good things for US. Similarly, US President Trump, I mean, he's not mincing his words, whether he wanted Canada to become a 51st state or thanks, we also manufacture our auto here. We don't want your cars. So many things. And we have our own internal challenges as well. I mean, it's not just the international front, but the domestic front as well. We have so many challenges. I mean, from inflation to housing to rise in the crime. Do we need more immigration or do we need less immigration? So multiple challenges at the foreign front and at the domestic front. And while we're celebrating future, I mean, we should be asking this question on Canada Day, and you just highlighted those two very important points. I mean, on Canada Day, we have to discuss this as well. Two of our major provinces, a referendum on referendum, happening in Alberta. Of course, it's just a referendum right now that should we have a referendum or not, and then things will kick in. But then, as you just mentioned, PQ not only is talking about holding a referendum, but PQ also mentioned that an independent Quebec will join NATO and NORAD. So that's a very significant statement made by PQ, which could be forming the government in Quebec in October. And we all know they've been talking very openly about, separatism. As much as, at least I want a united Canada. I want to see a united Canada. I don't want to, if I go to Quebec, I don't want to take a visa going there or going to Alberta. I might want to go there sometime in the summer next year. I don't want to take a visa there. And more importantly, I want to see united Canada. United, we're strong. We're a bigger country. We can share the resources. Of course, the concerns have to be addressed, whether it's separatism from Alberta or the concerns in Quebec. But with all these multiple challenges, I think I want to know your viewpoint. Where do we stand? What is the future of Canada? And just in 10 seconds, I also want you to touch upon this aspect as well regarding the population that you just mentioned. I mean, we're not bringing in that many immigrants now. The number of temporary foreign workers, we are reducing that. And actually, Prime Minister, in his statement, he was saying, yeah, we've done well. So that's the position moving forward. Your take on all this. Future of Canada.
The future of Canada, I feel that given where Canada was prior to President Trump's second term, even his first term, Canada was, you have to question why Canada had a pipeline from Alberta to the United States and why it didn't have a pipeline east coast to service its major populations in the province of Ontario and Quebec. Why did we not plan for those things? Why weren't we've had the province of Ontario talk about the Ring of Fire for a very long period of time with our critical minerals. We never really developed it. Alberta having the fourth largest reserves of oil in the world, we didn't really develop our pipeline to the west coast off of British Columbia. Yeah, we have the Trans Mountain that eventually, after investment dollars left, our federal government footed the bill. But in terms of having a massive capacity, we saw in the war with Iran, United States, and Israel, we saw that took 3 months, but at its peak was like 40 plus days. We saw because the Strait of Hormuz was closed, we saw Saudi Arabia expand its capacity through its other port, which went through the Red Sea, and it was able to do it in a short period of time. So the question remains, why didn't Canada have these thought processes? Why was it first of all sitting on all of its resources? And then secondly, not develop its resources, its pipelines, and then try to say it's bad. Meanwhile, we know we still rely heavily on oil, right? And having this entire thing where, oh no, we need to have carbon tax, we need to do this. I'm not saying climate change isn't real, but then when you look at India that said, if 2015, when or was it 2016 when everybody signed up to the Paris Agreement, India said, no, thank you. We're still a developing nation, and we can't sign on to the climate policy and have carbon tax and this and that. And look what they did in 10 years. Look what they did in 10 years, and they just opted out. And or other countries when they do that. And so you have to ask, like, was Canada meant to stay small because of the powers that be decided that Canada should just not grow and still always remain the shadow of the United States? Was that really the ideology of what was imposed? Because why is it that we didn't have premiers and prime ministers and MPs and MPPs fighting for these things? And is it just we had like a sweetheart deal where we have one customer, they take our exports, we rely on those industries, we have predictability and job numbers, we're bringing people, but yet we don't build fast enough. Like, we talk about housing challenge, but Canada's the second largest country in the world. We're not short of land. This is not Hong Kong. Okay, we're not shy of land at all where we need to just build skyscrapers. We have abundance of land. We just live in the southern border of Canada US border. And so why is it that we didn't develop our communities fast enough? We know when residential housing goes in, we put in the community center. It's a cookie cutter where you throw in the plaza with the Walmart and the grocery store and the TD and the RBC, and then you have the nail salon place, and then you have the community center, and then you have these are cookie cutter communities that even if you go to Hamilton or you go to Markham, it looks the same. There's no difference because we know based on this many households, we need to have this many schools. We figured all that out. We don't have a problem in that. But why is it we didn't build fast enough? Why is it that we don't have a highway? If Toronto's the biggest population in all of Canada, like, why is it that we just didn't do, is my question. And prior prime ministers, prior premiers, why weren't we developing our critical minerals when you know that the rest of the world needs it? You know that you want to be a player and that you could become a power player if you wanted to, right? We have everything. We have oceans on all sides from the east to the west to the north. Yes, our biggest border to the south is another country, which we've had really good terms with, except obviously, the rebellions and back then, when we had Upper Canada, Lower Canada, but that was a long time ago. But we have a really good relationship with our southern partners, but we're not in a situation where we can be invaded like other countries, like Ukraine or what you saw in these other countries where they don't have waterway for protection. Other countries like in all of Europe, they don't have the critical minerals that we have. They don't have the oil and gas sector. We have a highly educated population. Like, it's just, the question begs, why did we put ourselves in this situation? Was there an agenda that we were not aware of? I mean, I think the population, okay, maybe we became complacent, but where was that vision from our leaders who are now trying to have a vision? Like, we just learned that Ontario is doing a trade agreement with Utah, and we know that BC is trying to do other trade agreements with different states. But it's just kind of at a point where you're looking at what's happened in Quebec, which has been going on for a few different decades now. And now we're seeing that uprising in Alberta as well. And so the question remains, what, why didn't we wake up fast enough? Because now we're awake. And yet we know, like, we got to take the medicine, when the medicine doesn't taste good and it takes time to recover, and perhaps we'll be in a recovery period and maybe we do need hope and optimism through all of it. But it looks like, the vision that we potentially have right now, or the questions we're asking, will lead to those better questions of better planning. And I think that was the plan always to keep Canada smaller than America. And now that Canada is looking like it's doing so many things, we also have a referendum coming up. What happened? Right? Like, all of a sudden, like, I mean, yes, we could say for a long time Alberta's been feeling a certain way, but why did we have these laws in place that really created this situation with Alberta where we're like, no, oil and gas sector is massive in Alberta, but we're gonna write laws that are against it. Like, why do we do those things? Is the question. And it feels like sometimes it was more sinister than just whatever the case is. Yeah.
Yeah, I think those are very good points, and I'm sure most of us are asking all these questions, and you're right to ask this, and everyone is asking all these questions. But we're talking about the future of Canada, but you're right, we have to, just zoom out, take a step back, and really introspect. Where did we lose the plot? And if you ask me, you know what, we built first things first, on Canada Day, while we're all celebrating Canada Day, you know, so I must say this, uh, we- Canada is the most beautiful country in the world, number one.
It is. It is.
Number two, when we talk about G7 earlier was G8, by the way, and Canada was also one of the founding members. So Canada is one of the richest countries because G8 earlier and now G7 is a group of the biggest economies, the richest countries on this planet. So go ahead.
No, please, please.
Yeah, G20, we're part of G20. And I think we built an amazing country in terms of infrastructure. We were having Olympics, 1976, the Montreal Olympics. We're building great infrastructure. But then, to answer all your questions, you're right. Somewhere down the road, we got complacent. And you asked a very good point. And that's my point to everyone now. You said, was it deliberate to keep Canada smaller
so.
than US? Why?
I
You think so?
Well, yeah, because I've heard all kinds of stories about
Okay.
the oil and gas sector, for example. There's so many technology that just didn't come, that was forbidden to come to Canada.
Mhm.
From different sectors, from different business groups, they're saying, hey, why is it? Canada is one of the richest countries in the world, yet we have an affordability crisis. We have a housing crisis.
Yeah.
Tell me if that's not deliberate. We have abundance of everything. You could desire that countries go to war with those countries to extract those resources. We have all of it and more. Right? And yet, of course, thank God, no country's coming to war with Canada under the guise of religion or to spread democracy or whatever it is that has been said previously, or to eliminate terrorism and then exploit the natural resources of a country. So we're the richest country in the world when you add up everything we have at our disposal, from forestry, from everything, fresh water, from critical minerals, from oil and gas, like everything we have at our disposal. Yet we have an affordability crisis where our unemployment numbers are high, our youth unemployment numbers are high. And then you have that aspect. We have a housing crisis. Why? We have so much land, we have so much lumber, we have so much steel, we have so much aluminum, we have everything it takes to build a home. Right? And we have contractors, we have educations, we know how to, we have standards of education, regulations on every industry. So it's not like, we have infrastructure, we can get goods to the marketplace. Yet, why is it that we have all of these challenges if they were not created? Two reasons: either they're created on purpose, or we're just so out of touch that we can't count 1 + 1 = 2, right? And I don't think that's the case. I think we're very smart, hardworking people. So where do we lose the plot in your terms? And then why would we have like this 10-year now in law with MAID, right? Where somebody can now you can get assisted dying, right? If you're in a dire situation with the illness that you have and it's incurable. But now there was that criteria of now it would extend to mental health, that's on hold. But you had people, if you recall, in previous elections where their stories came out, they said, oh, I can't afford to pay my rent, I can't afford to live in Toronto, and I'd rather go on this medically assisted suicide. What would And then of course we harvest their organs. Like, why would we be in such a situation for such a rich country, for such an advanced civilization, to be in a situation where we say we can't afford our housing because there's housing shortage. Why is there housing shortage? Why is there housing shortage? I understand if we're in a tiny little island and there's nowhere to build, right? But wouldn't you understand that? So I don't understand why we have these problems that are solvable. Like our concerns are solvable. It's not like we have issues in our society that you cannot solve. Like there's just like nowhere to live, there's nowhere to work, there's nothing to eat. Why? We can make enough produce to feed all of Canada. Why are grocery prices so high? We have the land, we have the capability. We have a tiny population, all this farming land. Like literally Canada is a green belt. If you fly from East Coast to West Coast, if you drive through it, it's all a green belt. So why are millions of Canadians going to food banks? Because food is expensive. Why? I don't like these are problems we can solve. So excuse me if I don't want to hear another politician come to me and talk about a cultural celebration that we're going to get up to or celebrate this day or that day. Can we start solving very solvable problems that we're facing? Just like Canadians need to have food, water, shelter, basic criteria need to be met. And then there's the rest. So it's just bizarre. We're having these debates. Are you conservative? Are you liberal? Are you NDP? It's not about political, like where do you sit on the political spectrum in your ideology. Human is a human. Everybody needs to have a respectful way of life where they have good shelter, safe environment, food to eat, not be malnutrition, not to wait in lines to get food stamps, to get what do you get at a food bank? You get a lot of preserved stuff. Why should families have to go eat frozen foods or canned foods because it's too expensive to eat fresh food? Like why are we in this situation? And you can't say it's because we're lazy and we don't want to work. Like it's not that at all. Actually, more Canadians are working multiple jobs, their day job, their side jobs, their hustle. They're working Uber, they're working, they're delivering food, they're driving, they're doing all these extra other things. Why is that the case? Why can't they afford basic?
I think I'm not sure whether it was deliberate or not, but you're right to add to your point, that yes, all these things are definitely they could be solved. From my viewpoint, I think there was slackness. We lost the plot. We got complacent, and with due respect, I'm saying, was there that sort of vision even today as well? Even today as well, when we're talking, even our Prime Minister Mark Carney, with utmost respect, I'm saying this thing. I beg to differ. I really beg to differ when we're saying, okay, the middle powers should get together. To your earlier point that you made, I mean,
we don't even have to be middle power because we have everything at our disposal to become a superpower. We do.
If not a superpower, yes, of course, that if anybody would say,
like, let me play small, let me stay middle. No, you don't have to stay middle.
Yes. And if not a superpower, at least a global power. We should use, the words matter a lot. If I'm saying this, I have to participate in Olympics, I have to participate. Then the Monaji will think, okay, fine, Yudhvir has to participate in Olympics. If I say nothing short of a gold medal, I don't want to play second fiddle to anyone. On the victory stand, I will be there at winning the gold medal. That's what I aim for. And of course, anybody could say, Yudhvir, at your age, gold medal in Olympics, fine, I'm aiming for that. Let's see how it goes. It's still 4 years for the next Olympics. So that's what we should aim for. So yes, we could aim for superpower, but minimum, this is the term that I'm using these days a lot. We should, and what better day to discuss this when we're all celebrating Canada Day. We should aim to become a global power. And when I say global power, what is my definition of global power? And you can discuss this, that this is not possible or this is not possible. And as you just mentioned, I think you would also agree, we have all the resources to become a global power. When I say we want to become a global power, the first things first, economy, because without money, without our GDP, without those numbers, we can't do much. So yes, we're still in the top 10 bracket. I mean, we're not the 25th economy of 200 countries. No, we're not even the 15th or the 20th economy. We're still hanging in there with $2.5 trillion economy. So first thing first, global power in terms of an economic power. How do we get there? A clear-cut vision, number one. Second, a tech power. And to become a tech power, all it needs a vision. How do, and we're next to US as well. Look at the influx of money that's being pumped into US only because of one reason, AI. BlackBerry was the last thing that we created. But after that, are we putting any money in R&D research? And we need to lay out a plan that how do we become a tech power? The next iPhone, something like iPhone. I'm throwing random ideas here. Okay, we create a plane here, fine. And this plane doesn't need any sort of aviation fuel. Okay, wow, that sounds great. Okay, and we create a prototype and then it comes into the market after so much testing. You're right to your earlier point. When COVID hit, we didn't have any vaccines here. We had to buy at an good for us. Our procurement minister at that time, she was able to secure, but we had to pay a lot of price for that. We didn't produce much of the personal protective equipment at that time. It was approximately 3%. Now I would say the PPE is around 40-50%, but we did extend our manufacturing capabilities. But where are we now on vaccine manufacturing? Right? So there are so many things. So the second point for a global power, I'm saying a tech power. That's very important because the next wars, like you look at the Iran, what is that? A technology. You're firing drones, you're firing missiles, and here they have all this firepower in the world, but still, they're at least fighting. So a tech power. Third, of course, you have to become a military power today because the world is becoming more and more hostile. So we have to become that as a military power. Third and fourth and final thing, as you just mentioned, we are a G7 nation. Housing problem, inflation problem. These are basic needs.
We were the only one in a recession.
We're the only one in a recession. So
Why?
why? So for to become a global power, we need to check that the prosperity of the citizens. It could be called as a prosperity citizen index or whatever we want to call that. So economic power, a tech power, a military power, and very high on citizens prosperity index. So that will make us a global power. Let us lay out a map for that, and then Canada should aim for becoming a global power. And I'm with you. If you want to go ahead for becoming a superpower, I'm with you.
What is the difference between a superpower and a global power? Please tell us the definition.
Actually, there's no set definition for anything.
Okay.
Yeah, there is no set definition for a superpower or global power. I've coined this term. They could be using global power, so there is no set definition for a a superpower. But I would assume that if we were to really categorize, a country right now in a superpower category, from my definition, of course, as much as it has to be a massive, a very big economic power. But the second most important aspect is a military power which can defend itself by itself. Canada cannot do that today. Many of the European countries may not be able to do that by themselves. It's only US, China, possibly Russia, or maybe till a certain extent India. These are the only four powers that can really, they're huge economic giants as well. US, huge economic giant. That's a $30 trillion plus economy. China, 20 trillion and heading towards 50 trillion. India, inching up the fastest growing economy on this planet. So India quickly moving towards a 10, 15, 20, 30 trillion dollar economy. And all these four countries, Russia is not that big of an economic power, but it's still a major military power. So when I am saying superpower, so I'm only looking at three things right now, for to become a superpower. This is very dear to my heart, the Citizen Prosperity Index that I spoke about. And that is not something which you would have on a very high scale in China, Russia, and maybe India as well. But for a superpower, number one, economic power, Canada is like, what? We're 2.5 or, okay, heading towards the $3 trillion economy. We're not growing at a pace that we would become a $10 trillion economy.
Mhm.
Uh, if we lay out the maps by 2050 or by 2075, in the next 25 years or 24 years or the next 48 or 50 years, if China would become a $60 trillion economy, US or India would be somewhere around 50, 52. Maybe one would be second or third. And where do you have the rest? I mean, here you have a $60 trillion economy, then you have two economies which are 50, 52. And where do you have the rest? The entire European Union would be $20 trillion. And where is Canada? So we're not a superpower. No. To become a superpower, fine. Is there a roadmap in the next 24 years by the time China hits $50 trillion?
We don't have one.
We don't have a. So it's.
But the
Yeah, go
point
ahead.
is, we could. That's the
I'm with
point of
you.
our conversation.
I'm absolutely
Is
with
that
you.
we're
that
not
yes, we
even
can.
talking about these
Not even
levels.
talking. Yeah.
We're just talking about the federal government giving us a groceries benefit payment to 12 million Canadians because Canadians are hungry right now.
Yeah.
And that's why we're having you can have a productivity challenge if your citizens can't eat, can't afford where to live,
Yeah.
what to do. Like, so I'm not saying we don't have those programs. Yes, we have to address it, but why don't we fix the cause? Like payments, okay, but what's the long-term strategy? Why are we in this situation for us to be able to solve it? I think and we're such proud Canadians. We're such proud people, and we're such nice people. There's a massive difference in how Canadians are versus if you go to any other country, right? This is a place that, regardless of the numbers that you see on crime that are concentrated in certain areas, it's Canadians are such nice people. It's generally a safe country. It's one of the most beautiful countries if you were to ever travel throughout some of our provinces, coast to coast. It's just you're left in awe of the beauty of this place. And so it's just such a sad situation to see that we just we just put a band-aid on certain situations by saying, okay, here's a payment. Okay, a few $100s is not gonna change the problem that a family would receive. Or, when Ontario said, okay, well, you don't have to register your license every year, you'll save $130. That's not gonna solve the problems, right? Like, thank you, but can we start addressing the critical things that we need to, so we're not in the situation where we have every 4 years an election and then we talk about what to give away to this group, to that group. Let's start solving problems. Let's put people in a position of prosperity where they can afford to buy a home. That any young Canadian can afford to be a homeowner. Why can't we have that? Why can't we have that as a target? Yet these numbers are so small. Like, oh, we're gonna build a home, we're gonna put 40,000 there. It's not enough, right? Why? And also that's also housed out. That's also priced out people, because we have like concentration of few houses, and it's priced people out. Yet we have so much abundance of where we can. And there's also the planning of cities. Like, how can we, now that people have started working from home and technology is in a place, you don't need to live in Toronto downtown. You don't need to live in some of these hubs. You could live outside, like, but there's just like, where's all that planning? What's our trajectory? What are we hearing about? It would just be so great to have solutions to these problems that are just so solvable in a short period of time too.
Yeah.
In a very short period of time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. In the interest of time, I know we have to wrap up the show as well, but in the
Yes.
interest of time, I could lay down 15 points with facts and figures behind that how Canada can at least talk about. And you know what? I won't rule out talking about becoming a superpower. Why not? Why not? At least aim big. But the minimum standard should be a global power. I don't even like this word middle power. Because to your earlier point, is this a deliberate attempt to keep really Canada a middle power, a small power? Why? You're right. All these things are definitely doable. So in the interest of time, if I could lay down a few things, first things first. There's a lot of talent that's being wasted. How? because a lot of the immigrant population that comes to Canada, then they say, okay, fine, healthcare is one good thing, but I think we should move to states. A lot of my colleagues, from my engineering college days, I would say 90% of them have gone to
We're
states.
still shy of 1 million doctors here in
Yes.
Ontario.
Yeah.
And we have the brain drain that medical professionals study here and they go to the United States as well.
Every field, those who are immigrating, they go to states, and the doctors are moving to states. Then you have so many of the engineers who studied here. I mean, we have one of the finest college, whether you're studying from Waterloo, my friend studied from there, or even anybody who was born here in Canada. Because when they move out, one thing that we are not realizing, all these people who would have created jobs, who would have supported the economy, if they are moving to US, so we're losing all that taxpayer base, which would have helped us in affordability, lesser tax, and a million other things. Number one. So we need to work on that. Number one. Number two, very quickly, tourism. France has the maximum number of tourist visits every year. US makes the most money in tourism. We're such a huge country. So are we really working on tourism? Look, we blew this opportunity. Ronaldo playing in Toronto. Oh my God, at a stadium here. So I doubt even many, I mean, soccer fans would know Ronaldo is playing, but how many even in GTA know Ronaldo is playing here in GTA at a stadium here? So we blew this opportunity. The world was watching you. We were at a global stage, and very importantly, the Canadian team, Qatar was spending $200 billion to host the Soccer World Cup. So here we are, we got this Soccer World Cup and we blew this opportunity. I don't think so. We did a good job of, because that vision is not there, right? The other thing which I spoke earlier as well, how do we make this as a tech hub? The third point, let's make this as a tech hub. This is where the next forefront of growth will come from. Fourth, very important point, energy. Canada has all the things that the world needs. We've spoken a lot about crude oil, the natural gas, uranium. We also have all the rare earth minerals.
Yeah,
So when we're talking about the rare earths, everything, whether you're computers, electronics, AI center, the next revolution of AI is not possible. We have to become an integral part of all that. So where are we on that front? Fifth point, are we able to really, now we've started attracting some investment, but we got complacent. Let's go out in the world. There are a lot of sovereign wealth funds in the Middle East. There are huge capital investment could come from China, India, Japan. They could invest in our economy. They could create jobs. They could help us build a lot of infrastructure. We can also go and help them in building their infrastructure. There is a lot of opportunity for exports. So the bilateral trade agreements. So we're doing that, but it had to be done a lot faster earlier.
It has to be, yeah. No,
Yeah, go ahead.
please
No,
finish
please,
what you're
please, go
saying.
ahead.
No,
No, go
please
ahead.
finish.
Yeah, go ahead.
Finish what you're saying. You're
Okay.
laying out a whole plan. Please.
Yeah. So, okay, that's another point. Now, another aspect is when everybody wants to immigrate to Canada. So when we are bringing in immigrants, we stopped this investment because foreign buyers investment. So that investment into real estate has stopped. Then how are we making this a place attractive for all those billionaires? Why those billionaires are moving to Dubai? Why can't those billionaires move to Toronto, Vancouver, or anywhere here in Canada? So they will bring with them when those billionaires come over here. Most of the US states are fighting. Oh, California is fighting with Texas. Okay, we have those laws. We are making these laws. Some of the billionaires moving from California to Texas. So why are we not creating those facilities over here that we bring in billionaires over here? They will be here. Okay, fine. Dubai, the ICC, the International Cricket Council, the office is in Dubai. Dubai or UAE is not a big cricketing nation, but they built huge cricket stadiums. They're offering a lot of incentives for that. So they're doing million other things to do that.
They ran their economy on oil and gas, and then they invest in all those other things. We are at par in oil and gas in terms of the amount that we actually have probably more than them because we haven't extracted the way they have.
Yeah. One last point out of the 15 points in interest of time, I'll just say seventh and rest eight we'll discuss in some other show. I'm a huge, huge supporter of infrastructure. I know because we have infrastructure deficit in almost every single municipality that you talk today. They'll say, yeah, there is infrastructure deficit. So where is that vision? Where do we bring that money? Is it going to be a public-private partnership, or we bring in foreign investment in that? But a massive infrastructure, and we need that. It's not like China that okay, the infrastructure is overbuilt. Okay, enough of it now. Guangzhou to Shanghai to Beijing. No, we need that. China can host uh, a soccer World Cup and Olympics simultaneously. That's the sort of infrastructure that they have today. Today, I doubt we can even host Commonwealth Games today. So, build that infrastructure that will help support the economy, create the jobs, and our vision, a global power or a superpower. Go ahead.
Well, I think there also needs to be incentive for Canadians to start families.
Okay.
Right? You have South Korea that's now massively incentivizing people to get married, to have families. They even give them subsidies, they give them housing at a much affordable rate. And even so, prior to marriage, they've now invested in like certain parks and community places so people can go on dates and everything else. Because, when you have Canadians creating families and increasing the birth rate, because Canadian values are not just like they're not easy to come by. When I talk about Canadian values, what are Canadian values, right? There's this there's this courtesy we have for each other. We do. Even, for example, how we cross the road. The Canadian values are you don't just jaywalk. No, you pay attention. If somebody's in need, you go help what's going on. There's a level of things that we do here, even when it comes to how we drive. We don't just drive diagonally across the parking lot. We don't just stop where it's inaccessible for others to pass by. I'm talking about very little things, but they multiply in terms of how we are. I'll give you the perfect example. I was in my it was in my 20s, and I had just gone work in in overseas. And I decided for the first time, because I was traveling so much back and forth to coming to visit Canada, I decided that I was going to take the whatever the go thing was to the airport. I said, okay, great. So this one time I experienced this where the person who gets on the go didn't have, I think at the time it was like $2 to get on the go, and then said, oh, sorry, I can't. And then other people reached out in their pockets and said, because the last thing you want to do is leave somebody behind. They have to go to the airport or to the terminal, whatever the case was at the time. But I remember seeing that, thinking like only in Canada, because at the time I was in England, and in England, like if you can't afford your bus fare, the bus driver will tell you get off, or like the transit. No, people don't just reach out in their pockets to, here in Canada, we say thank you, sorry, please. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, please, thank you. This is just part of our language of this, like this kindness that Canadians have. Like it's just and having those good Canadian values, having families and procreating and having more children, there needs to be some, because if you look at the trajectory of countries that do well in terms of their GDP, they have a population, right? And I'm not saying anything about immigration. Of course, I'm an immigrant myself. Um, and immigration's all good and fair, but then there needs to be some sort of intense incentive for younger people, and maybe they would settle down if they could afford housing. Maybe they would settle down if they could have good jobs that pay them well to be able to afford to have a good standard of living, right? Maybe they wouldn't be putting it off till late 30s, early 40s, because they're trying to make a career and having multiple jobs. How are you supposed to make a family if you have multiple jobs? When do you have the time? So there's a lot of things I think we need to also look at to be able to be like, how do we grow our own population? I mean, because we assimilate. You came from India, you weren't born here, you're an immigrant. I wasn't born here, but do you not have Canadian values now? Isn't there, because you've spent time here? Do you know what I'm talking about? Those values that now you realize the difference when you go back to your home countries or to other countries, and you realize how different you are a little bit, because there's like a level of like kindness and care and like law-abiding citizen that's part of this Canadian identity and values. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I can't agree more with you. And you know what? You asked a very important question. I never thought it that way. To your earlier point, and then we'll talk about Canadian values as well. You're right. I mean, yes, I'm all in for immigration, and I'm an immigrant myself, as you just said. We both are immigrants here. But then those Canadian values, the very social fabric of this country.
Huge.
And if you would ask me, I didn't come here as an Did I come here to study? No, I did my engineering. I was married in India, so I didn't come here to study or engineering. I was not an economic migrant. I was doing very well in India. But the reason that I stayed, you highlighted that point, that social fabric, those Canadian fabric, I said, Canadian values, I said, oh my God, I love this. And when I say Canada is the most beautiful country in the world, I say this so often. I love Canada. I want to have a united Canada. The reason is, you've hit the nail on the head. The reason is, if I had to sum up, if somebody asked me, you say the most beautiful country, Switzerland is beautiful. This is not the biggest economy. This is not the biggest country, but the second largest country, in terms of population, we're not there. Is it the World Cup champion of soccer or cricket or Olympics? How many medals do? I said, all that is great. Not the most visited country. There are other destinations when you talk about tourism. Then why would you say? Yudhvir, I've heard you very often saying this, and you've reminded me. Actually, you've helped me articulate that answer well, because that's what I always wanted to say. Why would I always say Canada is the most beautiful country in the world? Exactly, that is the reason. I love my country. I'm from India. I'm proud of that. I love India. If today India is playing at 3 a.m. in the morning, I'll wake up to cheer India. I have free day. Every day I'll wake up. But still, I'm saying Canada is the most beautiful country in the world. Why I'm using the adjective most? I'm not saying Canada is a beautiful country. I'm saying the most beautiful. The reason is, you've just mentioned that. You've hit the nail on the head. And that's helped me articulate this. Canadian values. Of course, on stop sign we stop. And I would say, okay, sir, please.
Yeah.
Even if I have the right of the way, I'll flash my lights, sir. Please go ahead. And it's not even about others. This is what, and you know what? Our own ancient values in India. When we start soul searching, when we start really reading about what was about it in ancient India and that part, you used a very important thing for India, the father of spiritualism,
Mother of spirituality,
spirituality,
mother and father of spirituality is
spirituality to
India.
India.
Yeah, it
Why?
is, yeah.
So when I look at all those values, whether it's from the Hinduism, whether it's from Buddhism, Jainism, Christianity, the Sikh religion, Islam, all those values, when I read, they're very much aligned with the Western values. But this country, Canada, we're filing our own taxes. They say, okay, fine, fine. Stop sign, they would assume you'll stop at stop sign. You mentioned about jaywalking, absolutely right. Even when we're walking, we'll say hi, how are you? Very nice and a polite way. These are Canadian values. We are concerned if someone is hurt, that compassion, that kindness,
Yeah.
And when I came to this country, though it's a funny thing as well, and those are the Canadian values. When I came to Canada, the first time I landed at airport, and I suddenly realized that you need $1 to put in the card. And I had, I have money, but these are all traveler's check. So suddenly there was a gentleman right beside me, and he said, take this
Right?
dollar.
They take this dollar.
I
Yes.
said, no, thanks. I don't know what I said, no, no worries. You can pass it on somewhere. Thank you. And this guy left immediately. And I said, oh my God.
Yeah. That's
I mean,
cool.
he just understood. And he was looking at me because he realized, that yes, this guy is here. I was all by myself. I was at 26, and that was the first time at Peterson International Airport for me. So this guy is helping me out. So many times, multiple times, the police would, this is Canadian values, the police would stop you. They'll say, sir, I think, what speed were you traveling? Do you know that? Oh my God, where else would you get that? These were many reasons I decided, you know what, I'm going to stay in this country. this is the and till date I'm saying this after I would say almost 26 years in this country. This is the most beautiful country. And don't take me wrong, I love India. I'm from India, proud to be born in India. I love my heritage, I love my roots. I want India to become the biggest economy. But on Canada Day, while we're celebrating Canada, you highlighted such an important point. So why not? It's very difficult to, impart those Canadian values. I must admit that myself. It took me some time, and I was young too. It took me some time, and maybe I went back soul searching on my roots. I started seeing Buddhaji and all those things that helped me really, get those Canadian values in me. But there's no plug. So, I mean, the Yudhvir that I am today, when I was 26, I was a different Yudhvir. As much as there was a lot of spirituality being practiced at our home, even at that time. But I should admit that the compassion, the kindness, those and those manners, those etiquettes are one thing. But that compassion that I see over here, I mean, I've been to almost every single hospital that you can name in GTA. Just recently, one of our colleagues, was in hospital, and I went there. There was a guy sitting on a wheelchair, his leg amputated, and there was another female sitting over there. And as much as I was in Russia, I was taking smoothies for my colleague, and then this guy, hi, how are you? I had to stand. I had to talk to this guy. And the energy exchange that I had with this gentleman and the lady sitting besides, both of them on wheelchair, he was all smiles. Oh, they started from this thing. Hi, how are you? Look at. They started. I mean, out of nowhere, out of the blue, they start talking to me. I was rushing inside the door, and they started with I started, yeah, and we had a good 10-minute conversation. The energy exchange that we have. These are Canadian values. In India, would say hi, hello, okay, fine, let's go inside. The guy is waiting.
In England, same thing. I
Sorry,
remember
go ahead.
that time incident with that person who didn't
Mhm.
have, and I was searching to also give them enough fare to, and so did a whole bunch of people who were
Mhm.
sitting in front reached out to give the person a fare to get on to get on the ride. And I remember thinking, like, in England, like, if I drop something, no one's gonna help me pick it up. In London,
Mhm.
or in New York, no one's gonna stop. And but in Canada, it's different. We had a few cases of fallen police officers. Did we not get sad?
Mhm.
There's a level of respect also as with Canadians with authority.
Yeah.
Authority figures, there's a level of respect we have for them. There is an agreement that if we are law-abiding citizens, that there's a level of predictability here. So all of these things are just such a big part of an average Canadian is not a troublemaker, isn't trying to um, create a terrorist attack on their own people. Like, this is not this is not here. And I say, you go outside and talk to anybody anywhere you are and say hello to them, people will say hi back. You hold the door, they say thank you. Oh, thank you so much. They don't just expect it. There's just it's a very it's and you don't see it anywhere else. You see it here, and it's and you don't have to be born here to have the Canadian values be contagious and to catch on to it. And I think we need to have more incentive for Canadian families to grow their families, for young people, any age people, just get married, create families, invest in Canada. And Canada needs to be a place where it invests in its people to say, yes, you can have housing. Housing is a right. Housing should be a right. Fresh food should be a right. Just like how we have education as a right. We subsidize our education. Even university subsidized here, so everybody could have a decent level of education. These are rights that we give to Canadians, and therefore housing should be definitely a right, and fresh food should be a right. And then we can see from where we can have our productivity challenges solved. Just we have to do that for our people. Do not tell me, I don't want to hear from a politician telling me this is this country Heritage Day that we're celebrating. We already know we're diverse, but we're Canadian first. Now because we all share the Canadian values. We do.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And to sum up, I'll say, wherever I fly, I you know, Enjoyed my stay in Melbourne, Sydney. If I could pick the top three, definitely it would be Sydney, Central London, and then Melbourne. These would be my top three cities, you know. But then at the end of the day, the moment my plane flies in Toronto, as much as I love Delhi as well, you know, I've been there many times, and Jalandhar, of course, because that's my home city. Chandigarh, that's where I was born. So I could go on with all those cities, you know. I love all those cities. I love travel. But at the end of the day, the moment I'll come back to Toronto, I'll say this is home for me, for simply for this reason that you just mentioned, you know. Yes, I'm so attached with this place, these Canadian values, you know. If you ask me, I feel as a visitor, or maybe in certain cities, I would also, you know, feel alienated there. That's the sort of, you know, we're so blended in the social fabric, you know, because this very much aligns with anybody who's thinking, you know, to live a peaceful, calm life. I would say the social fabric itself offers you that because you go there. How's your day going? How's the weather? It's not about, okay, sir, deposit a check and go
No,
away. No.
and we're considered city people, so you can just imagine the Canadians who are not in Toronto or
Yeah.
GTA and the level of values and kindness and generosity they have. We're talking about it as city people, so you
Mm.
can just I mean it's great. But I think we
Yeah,
are
yeah,
done at a time for this editor's take. It's
yes.
always great to be able to talk with you and hear your thoughts about what's happening with the state of affairs in the Canadian economy and global affairs. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Long live Canada. Go Canada, go. Happy Canada Day. Thank you so much, Ramanaji. You know, on this editor's take, we'll say thank you so much to everyone. Ramanaji, thank you.
Thank you so much. And regardless of the challenges we talked about, what we're facing today, we do believe that Canada has a very bright future. And I think the more of these conversations we cultivate, whether on this episode or even on your radio show or your TV show where you have callers calling in, whether in the morning show or the evening show, the more of these conversations we have, I think amongst us with such brilliant, good people we have in Canada, that we're going to be able to solve these problems. There's solutions for all of these problems and challenges. But the good thing is that we're proud Canadians and we have tremendous faith and hope in Canada's future.
And I have no reason to believe that Canada cannot be a global power or a superpower for sure. Go Canada, go. Thank you so much, Ramanaji.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Stay tuned with Y Media. Thank you.
Toronto,